Welcome to the Magic Book channel, and thank you for joining us for a video featuring our new original story. Alana watched her husband, Mark, look over her grocery purchases with disgust, and she felt a wave of sadness. She braced herself for the lecture she knew was coming. About how she was materialistic, a bad homemaker, unable to balance their budget with her frivolous spending. About her childish immaturity, something she really should have outgrown by 30. The specific words Mark used varied each time, but the message remained the same. She was a wasteful spendthrift. Why had he trusted her again to go shopping? Mark, meanwhile, was just warming up. Let me see the receipt. I want to check everything. Don't you understand supermarkets have sales, special offers? Why on earth did you buy Italian pasta when you could just boil the regular kind? What was I thinking, tying my wonderful life to a woman like you? And why did I even pick you up at that club? You're nothing but a financial drain. Nothing but whys and what-fers. Alana desperately wanted to remind him that she was the one who had picked him up. Dirty after a fight with some rowdy guys, alone on the dance floor in utter despair. They'd met at a nightclub where Alana was a guest at a bachelorette party. A colleague was getting married, saying goodbye to her single life. Mark had ventured into the chaotic noise to drown the pain of a recent breakup. He was lashing out at every man around, seeing in them the enemy, the demon who had stolen his woman. Tired from the long evening, Alana was waiting for a taxi outside the club when some guys literally threw a resisting young man out the door. His sweater and jeans were filthy, one eye was swelling shut, and a scratch on his cheek was bleeding. The security guards suddenly found something else very interesting to look at. But Alana, with her kind heart, couldn't just walk by. She didn't stand on ceremony with the brawler. She half-dragged, half-pushed him into the arriving cab, explaining, "You want to stay here with them? Be my guest. In your state, they won't even let you on a bus. Let's get you cleaned up at my place. I doubt anyone else will want to deal with you." Surprisingly, the stranger listened. He was also quite drunk and not thinking clearly. Once at her apartment, which she practically had to carry him into, he even smiled at her after she'd washed the fight off him and decided to test her a bit. "And what about you?" "Mother Teresa, I see. Well, you don't know a thing about me. And you brought me to your home. I could rob you right now, or worse." He tried to lecture her further, but passed out mid-sentence, overcome by the warmth and coziness, defeated by the strong alcohol. He was out cold on her small kitchen sofa. Alana covered him with a soft, fluffy blanket and only then got a good look at him. Handsome, but somehow lost. She hadn't even had time to ask his name or give hers. Her friend, Julie, would scold her again when she heard about this adventure. "Lord, Alana, you're so hopeless. What if he's some criminal element? You have no sense of fear, and then you'll have no one to blame but yourself. If I didn't know you inside and out, I'd think you were some crazy woman, not a thought in your head." They had been friends since childhood, from the orphanage, classmates. They had both lost their parents in an instant. The story of both families was tragic. A bus, a trip along the Golden Ring during winter break, a cheerful group of children and their older relatives. A terrible accident, shown on every news channel. A huge truck, whose driver lost control on the icy road, plowed into the side of their small coach. Everyone on that side died. Alana and Julie had been dozing in the back on empty seats. On that fateful trip, only these two girls had gone with both parents. The others were with an older brother, a grandmother, an aunt, and uncle. Fate. Neither girl had any other relatives able to take them in. After that terrible evening, Alana and Julie became like sisters. Fortunately, they were placed in the same children's home. That helped them survive, to endure, to get into architecture school on an orphan scholarship, to get a profession. Since then, it became their custom. They both kept their parents' apartments and loved to take turns living in them. Sometimes Julie at Alana's, sometimes Alana at Julie's. They only gave each other space when one started a relationship. But their luck in love wasn't great. Nothing serious. There were always guys looking for free lodging, a cook, and a companion all in one. They appeared easily and vanished without a second thought. No, the girls weren't flighty, changing partners like gloves. Each had maybe a couple of those short, unsuccessful romances in her past. Then they began to mature rapidly. Life experience brought discernment, which is why Julie always scolded Alana for her thoughtless acts of soulful charity. The next morning, the man Alana had rescued first stared wide-eyed at the unfamiliar surroundings, then strained to remember anything. Then, with great appetite, he devoured an omelette with sausages and praised the hostess. Finally, he asked, perplexed, Did something happen between us last night? Alana reassured him. You were a perfect gentleman, from head to toe. You took a shower, let me wash your clothes, and fell asleep. Mark thanked Alana for her kindness, the delicious breakfast, and her compassionate soul. He said his goodbyes and disappeared. Later, Alana and Julie had a good time gossiping about him, lamenting the lack of real men. Soon, they forgot about their non-knight, a true character of sad countenance that the girls always worked in tandem. Julie, the architect, provided the shell for the future home or office. Sketches, outlines, a hint of the overall style, spirit, era the salty filling, the mincemeat for this stone pie, perfectly fitting. Alana, the interior designer, filled that shell, making it come alive. Graceful and grand, if not exotic, then unique, like nothing else. They didn't have a sky-high number of orders, but they earned enough to get by, nothing more. They weren't widely known in the market yet. They moved from client to client mostly through word of mouth. They didn't have many important connections yet, but the orders they did get became their beloved children, their joint creation, a piece of their soul. And why was she a dependent? She earned no less, maybe even more, than her husband. You didn't have to warm an office chair to do that. Being a freelancer was modern, convenient. What did it matter where Alana labored over the design of another interior? A free artist on a free schedule, managing her own time. With a heavy heart, she obediently handed Mark the receipt. For the 100th time, she thought, we need to split up. But it hadn't happened, hadn't worked out. Her beloved husband was clearly cheating. Should she stoop to spying on him, digging through his laptop and phone? Their marriage was over. Alana smiled ironically, remembering how she had accidentally found a velvet box with a small diamond ring in her husband's pocket yesterday. She could have started a huge scandal, a showdown. But she just noted the fact to herself, summarized. Looks like my husband is planning a trip to the registry office, ready to propose. That ring looks very much like an engagement ring. She wondered, did his new flame know he was married? Or had he hidden that fact from her? Alana remembered the romantic beginning of her relationship with Mark. He had burst into her life like a hurricane, with a huge teddy bear and a fancy cake. He had come to thank her for her help outside the nightclub and stayed for 3 whole years. Candy, mimosas, daisies, clumsy love poems, passionate nights. Mark courted her rapidly, with pressure, almost fiercely, accustomed to the adrenaline of his stuntman job, always injecting their love with speed, daring, fire. But as quickly as he ignited, he burned out just a year later. They had already married by then, putting stamps in their passports at his insistence. They lived at her place. He didn't own any property in the city. Her friend Julie had joked back then, Alana, your beloved is like a match. He sees you and bursts into flame. Alana sadly noted to herself that the fire of Mark's passion had almost completely died out. It was unknown if even a single ember still glowed in his heart for her. As if in answer to her silent questions, Mark finished his latest moralizing lecture and remembered something important. His face instantly brightened, becoming cloyingly kind, almost sweet. Alana, darling, I almost forgot to tell you. A colleague invited me to an anniversary party today. It's a guy's night out at a countryside cafe. The guest of honor even booked motel rooms, just in case someone drinks too much to drive home. So don't wait up for me tonight. And please, draw the right conclusions from what I said. Money needs to be spent wisely, not as mindlessly as you do. Alana understood immediately. Tonight was a big night for her husband. He was likely planning to propose to his girlfriend. She knew Mark liked clarity in everything. If he was seriously involved with a woman, he would marry her, period. A little thing like another stamp in his passport wouldn't stop him. He had apparently postponed the conversation with her, but she wouldn't delay. When you leave, you leave. Alana closed the door behind her husband, dressed up for the occasion. She had conscientiously ironed his formal shirt for him and picked out the right tie. Her artistic taste was impeccable. Mark went to the banquet looking very presentable. Alana couldn't allow her husband to propose to his beloved woman while looking unattractive. Inside, it still hurt. If she called her loyal friend Julie right now, she would say, Alana, run from him and from the pain. We can handle it, we'll manage, we'll get through it. A saving thought flashed through Alana's mind like a comet. She knew exactly what she would do. She would change the locks on the front door, but first, she would pack Mark's things. It wasn't right to send a man out onto the street in just a suit, shirt, and tie. A small suitcase with a change of underwear, a shaving kit, and a toothbrush wouldn't hurt. Professionals in architecture, interior design, and renovation always have a circle of acquaintances in the field. Alana and Julie had their own team. Within an hour, a guy she knew well, a specialist in locks and security systems, was knocking on her door. He installed new locks, beautiful and functional. As he left, he assured her, "Not a mouse or an ant will get through, don't you doubt it. And I won't take your money. My sister still squeals with delight about the studio you decorated for her for free. One good turn deserves another. If you need anything else, just call." Meanwhile, Mark, unaware of the changes at home, was having a great time. The party was a success. There really were no wives or girlfriends, but he was a sly, experienced ladies' man. He had arranged everything with Marina in advance, staged a chance meeting, and everything went according to plan. The tipsy colleagues paid little attention to what was happening around them. Mark disappeared from sight. Well, what man doesn't dream of being single for an hour or two? If a buddy picked up a girl, let him have fun, take a break from the wife. Mark and Marina sat at a table in a private booth. He immediately took the gift from his pocket. "Marina, I've waited so long for this moment. I've made a decision. I'm leaving my wife. We can be together all the time, not just now and then. You'll marry me. I'm burning with love for you. Soon there'll be nothing left of me but ashes." The cheerful Marina laughed heartily. "Marky, I never had such long-term plans. I live in a dorm while I study. I'll graduate soon. I wanted to move closer to the capital, Moscow or St. Petersburg. That's a whole different level of opportunity, brilliant prospects. But family, that's duty and responsibility, children. I'm not at all ready for that. The ring is cute, though, thanks. Want me to wear it in honor of your love for me? Oh, don't pout, sweetie. I'm not rejecting you. Let's revisit this conversation in a year or two, or maybe we can move to the capital together. It'll be easier to survive as a team. We'll rent a place, find jobs, settle in. My career comes first for me right now. I didn't study marketing for nothing. I want to apply my knowledge, see the world, and show myself to the world." Mark's arms suddenly went limp. He stopped mid-sentence, looking intently at Marina. Was there any real feeling for him in that pretty little head? Or was he just a random travel companion in her life? Another handsome stranger to keep her warm? Right now, she was twisting a cocktail glass in her hand, twirling a long blonde lock around her finger, smiling invitingly. Not a shadow of remorse, not a gram of doubt. She didn't even understand what he had just laid on the altar of their relationship. His family, his wife, stability. Well, being as if to ruffle his feathers further, Marina just added, "You look so handsome today, all dressed up. I never knew business suits suited a stuntman so well. And what a stylish tie. I quietly took a picture of you from afar earlier, when you were still with your friends, and sent it to my girlfriends to show off my handsome guy. They're in awe. They're always jealous of me when I'm with you. You're a darling, a lucky charm, a gift in mail form." A veil seemed to fall from Mark's eyes. His girlfriend was an airhead, a lightweight person who didn't plan ahead, living by the principle of whatever happens, happens. To her, he was a prestigious older lover, generous, giving gifts, taking her to trendy places, with pleasant looks to boot, not embarrassing to show off to her friends. That was the extent of his virtues in Marina's and her circle's eyes. Mark suddenly desperately wanted to return to his friend's table, down 200 grams of vodka in one go, and forget his humiliation. He had been seriously in love with this doll, hadn't been joking about the divorce, had deliberately needled Alana with his nitpicking so she would start the fight first. Then betraying her wouldn't feel so shameful. Mark's heart contracted painfully. He wasn't fundamentally stingy. He wasn't his wife's enemy. A womanizer, alas, he was and was known to be, but strangely, he still loved Alana in his own way, yet made her pay for his own sins. Mark remembered their evenings with Alana, how she cooked her favorite stuffed pasta. Just like in Italy, but her own way. Not just ordinary mac and cheese, but real pasta. It didn't matter that such a dish didn't really exist in Italian cuisine. Well, pasta itself certainly did, but it was made with different recipes and techniques. Alana could add anything that came to mind to her designer culinary creation, and it was always delicious. He had been wrong to scold her just today for buying more expensive Italian pasta. Her signature dish turned out much tastier with it. Mark was suddenly overwhelmed with a sharp desire to go home to his wife. Maybe she'd stopped being mad at him. She'd make him coffee, and they'd watch some silly chick flick, a tearjerker melodrama. He hated all that pink slush, as he called such movies. But Alana loved guessing how the characters' fates would turn, what twists the plot would bring. Mark actually broke out in a sweat from the unbearable desire to be home with Alana. Marina had ceased to interest him completely. Let her keep the ring as a memento of their 6-month fling. This woman no longer held any appeal to that moment. Alana was pulling up to her friend Julie's place, carrying 2 boxes of pasta, a bottle of dry wine, and some groceries. She understood perfectly well that Mark would return home and not be able to get in. But she couldn't face him right now. She'd stay with Julie for a couple of days. They'd have a good talk and work on their new project. Work-wise, Alana was on cloud 9. They'd been trusted to design a retro-style cafe. She loved that kind of challenge. She could already see the cafe walls with old-time brickwork. And even if the idea wasn't new, she and Julie had completely different ideas about how to execute it. Alana believed in success. Moreover, she liked that the owner had given them free rein, saying he wouldn't interfere during the process, only showing up at the end to accept the finished work. Julie opened the door the moment Alana rang the bell, took the bags from her, and immediately showered her with questions. What brings you here for so long? Has your man gone on a business trip, or did you have a serious fight? Alana smirked. Her friend's woman's intuition was spot on. She wanted to spill everything, complain, but a warning bell chimed inside her. Julie had never really approved of Mark, so until she sorted out her own feelings, maybe it was better to just state the basics. Alana stood at attention and reported crisply, "Permission to report, Comrade Commander. Conducting educational work with my husband. Packed his things for a trip so he can think about his behavior. Changed the locks at home. He won't be able to get in without me." Julie was so surprised she even sat down on the couch. "Are you serious, girl? You've heard me grumble about Mark enough. But I don't say it out of malice. I'm not advising you to fully experience what female loneliness is. I've always been a little envious of you. I'd look at your love with Mark and wish I could have something like that. The lock idea might be good. It's your apartment, it's legal. But don't act too rashly, honey. Mark's parents live in another city. He'll come back from the party, won't get into the house, and have to sleep on the street. He's a feisty drunk by nature. He might get into trouble again. It's your decision, but I'm just giving you my opinion." Alana's mood for chatting, eating pizza, and drinking wine suddenly vanished. Why was everything so complicated? She knew for a fact Mark had cheated and was cheating. He hadn't bought that little ring for a buddy's anniversary. But she had never caught him red-handed, never played the spy. The rumors were right, all men were polygamous. They got bored with one woman. They needed space and new flights of fancy. Julie was quietly puttering in the kitchen, not disturbing Alana's thoughts. Alana vividly pictured the scene. Their empty courtyard late at night, lonely perimeter lights, a lost Mark sitting on a bench near the playground under an old poplar tree. She felt a moment had arrived that could divide her life into before and after. Something inside her ached. Dully, telling her she needed to go home and talk to her husband one more time before they both did something stupid. Alana began dressing rapidly. Shoes, jacket, scarf. Already in the hallway, she realized she had taken off her sweater at Julie's and hadn't bothered to put it back on. The taxi arrived quickly, and she warmed up in the car. Home, quickly home. She was almost right. Her unfortunate husband was talking to someone on the phone, shivering from the penetrating wind. Probably chatting with Julie about her, wondering where his wife had disappeared to and why he couldn't get into the house. Alana quietly crept closer to Mark from behind the bushes. She was about to reach out and cover his eyes from behind, let him guess who it was, when a fragment of his sentence stopped her. "Julie, I remember our little affair fizzled out long ago. I understand Alana just left your place and could come back any minute, but maybe you could take me in for old time's sake? Remember our meetings and your dreams of being with me? Decide quickly, before my crazy little wife shows up. Can you believe the punishment she came up with? Changing the locks. That's low and mean. Okay, I'm coming over." Alana recoiled. What were you supposed to do when struck? Turn the other cheek? At that moment, she wasn't struck on the cheek. She was lashed across the entire face. And by whom? Julie. The person who was always there, even closer than Mark. Her best friend. A sister in misfortune, a work companion, a pillow for girlish and womanly tears. Alana wanted to step into the middle of the courtyard and scream, "Can you trust anyone in this world?" Mark got up from the bench and vanished into the evening gloom. She trudged home. 3 months had passed since that terrible, strange, cruel night when everything hidden became clear to Alana. They were very difficult months. Julie unambiguously took Mark's side. He now lived in her apartment. The three of them met together only once, to exchange belongings. Alana took from Julie everything related to their joint work. Mark took his junk, as he called it, from Alana's place. There were no arguments, showdowns, or scandals. Their shared world had simply collapsed. Now each had to go their own way, having lost, respectively, a husband, a wife, and a closest friend. Such is life. Alana didn't analyze anything. Her pain was still so raw she was even afraid to touch her emotional wounds mentally. Gritting her teeth, she refused to participate in their joint project. Work unexpectedly came to her rescue through the very locksmith who had changed her locks. He called himself, saying a sculptor needed a creative studio with an unusual design, one that would inspire him. Inside Alana was a scorched desert filled with disappointment. But she took the risk, plunged headfirst into the new project. It turned out very interesting, with a sharp edge and vibrant energy in the interior. At the studio opening, she received sincere applause and a new commission. She sighed with relief. Almost hellish labor without breaks gave her a chance to forget today. An anxious phone call shattered the night silence in Alana's apartment like a police or fire siren. It was Julie. Without a greeting, she began to babble incoherently. "We are in trouble, Alana. Mark fell from a great height during a stunt. There were some safety violations. He has a serious spinal injury. He's in a coma. The doctors aren't sure he'll survive." Finishing her tirade, Julie asked hopefully, "Will you come to the hospital? I've been here 3 days. I need to go home, even just to change. Can you help out?" Alana didn't answer. She was in turmoil and mechanically pressed the end call button. There was no malice in her soul, only doubts. Was she needed there at the hospital? They'd call her now, and then she'd become unnecessary to both of them again. Her kind nature won out. Was now really the time to settle scores? Julie called back a couple of minutes later. "Send me the hospital address. I'll be there soon." They met in the corridor near the room. Julie looked like a frightened, disheveled sparrow. Hair tousled, mascara smeared under her eyes, clothes wrinkled. She immediately launched into explanations again. "I needed extra money for the renovation at my place. So Mark took on this shady gig. For the scene, the hero had to climb the sheer wall of a new building to the 10th floor where his beloved was being held captive. Mark fell from the 4th floor. Something was wrong with the safety gear. Now no one wants to take responsibility. The employers are in denial, saying a hired professional stuntman should have checked his own climbing equipment. Alana listened to these details with half an ear. Her heart constricted. She felt very sorry for Mark, who was, in essence, weak-willed. That was true. But he wasn't a mean person. Cheating on her with her friend certainly didn't paint him in a positive light, but he was always more of a follower, yielding to a woman, than a leader. Not the kind of man who solves all problems, becomes a reliable shoulder, a wall to hide behind for his girlfriend or wife. Those characteristics didn't apply to Mark. A militantly disposed nurse blocked her path at the room entrance. "You can't go in, only relatives." "What is your relation to him?" For the first time in a long while, Alana gave a sincere, ironic smile. She took her passport from her purse. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am the legal wife of your critically ill patient. I've come to relieve his mistress from her post beside him." The nurse recoiled. "What kind of jokes are these, woman? His wife is standing right there." She gestured at Julie, crying and carrying on. "Or is he a Muslim, allowed multiple wives?" Julie, stunned by this exchange, started gathering her things to go home. She quickly showed Alana where everything was, nodded toward the corridor. "Our attending physician is on duty today. Give me time to be at home, to pull myself together a bit. I'll relieve you tomorrow. After all, it's exactly as you said. You're still his legal wife. Neither of you filed for divorce. So the hospital administration won't have any questions for you. She hastily pulled on a hoodie, tied her sneakers, and seemed to dissolve into thin air. The elderly nurse was still staring wide-eyed at Alana. My, the times and the morals of youth these days. Who can figure out who's who to whom anymore? I have fours to set up in other rooms. Alana entered Mark's room. The sight was not for the faint of heart. Monitor screens glowed with medical data. Her husband's body was stretched out on a complex traction device, tubes protruding everywhere. Silence. You could even hear the four drip. Drip, drip, drip. She pulled a chair to the bed and sat down, not really knowing how to act. 5 a.m., not quite night, not yet morning. The clock on the wall seemed to have gone mad. Alana watched it. The hands moved lazily, reluctant to budge. 10 minutes felt like an hour. The on-duty doctor, tired, with sad eyes, saved the dismal situation. He tried not to look at Alana during the conversation. The duty nurse said, "You are this patient's wife." Then I'll repeat what was already told to the other woman. Your husband's condition is stable but critical. He's physically strong, and there's every chance he'll come out of the coma soon and survive. But even now it's clear. The injury affected extremely critical areas of the spine. He will never walk again. Not even the most modern treatment or surgery will help. His lot will be a wheelchair, I'm afraid. Alana listened, and the usual questions swirled in her head. Why Mark? For what sins did this misfortune befall him? She certainly never wished him any harm. She tuned back into the doctor's monologue. He was talking about specialized institutions for such disabled individuals, enthusiastically repeating that he personally knew 2 guys with similar injuries who had won gold medals in international competitions. Alana stopped this flow of words with a gesture and promised dryly, "Don't worry, doctor. Sending Constantin to a rehab facility for the disabled is out of the question. Let him recover first, then the picture of his situation will be clearer. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." The doctor stopped mid-sentence, looked at Alana strangely, and gave an indeterminate snort. "All right, as you wish. Time will put everything in its place." Julie didn't keep her promise. She didn't return to the hospital. First, she didn't show up at the appointed time, then she didn't answer Alana's worried calls for a long time, apparently thinking and making her final decision, as Alana later defined it for herself. The difficult conversation between the 2 women who had shared one man's heart happened later. Julie stated bluntly, from the very beginning, as soon as Mark showed up on my doorstep, life with him wasn't exactly sweet. Occasional meetings are one thing, sharing a daily life with him is quite another. Living together showed me I'm not ready for a semblance of family life with borscht and meatballs. I don't like washing and ironing men's clothes that smell of sweat after physical labor. I'm irritated by little things scattered around the apartment, other people's toiletries in the bathroom. We never became close, Alana. So take back your little trophy that's been passed around. Caring for an invalid isn't something I need. Our little love affair with Mark is over. Besides, I met another man on social media. We are actively chatting, already discussing a meeting. Her former, closest, best friend, having laid out all her arguments, slowly walked away across the hospital courtyard where they had talked. Alana said nothing to her in the end. She just knew it was over. This time, the years-long friendship had reached its absolute end. That shattered cup couldn't be glued back together. She needed to think about how to live on, what to do with the husband who now remained solely in her care. Alana probed her feelings after yet another betrayal by her friend. The feeling was roughly this. This isn't really happening to me. Mark is no longer needed by anyone in this world, which means I have to figure out how we'll live, how to treat him further, how to help him recover. Thoughts that she shouldn't save her ex, who loved to stray, didn't occur to her. There were, after all, some universal human values. Kindness, mercy, forgiveness. Or had the modern world, racing along the rails of technological progress, already forgotten such virtues? She began running through options in her mind. His parents? Couldn't count on them. They were the type who release their child from the nest once and for all, quickly getting used to the idea that the kid will build their life independently. They lived on the other side of the country. In all the years Mark and Alana were married, she had never even met them. Stingy birthday and New Year's calls. That severed slice of bread had no chance of rejoining the loaf. Mark's shady gig. She had already tried to find any traces of the tragic incident at the actual construction site that served as a movie set. Some tipsy watchman had just stared at her with surprised eyes. "What are you talking about, miss? We've never had any filming here. Did your husband get confused?" The police. She'd been there too. An officer with captain's insignia was polite and extremely attentive. He stated firmly that no reports of a possible crime had come from the hospital. To open a criminal case for negligence regarding safety during work, they needed a statement from the victim, and he was still unconscious. If there's an official statement, there will be an investigation. The bottom line after all her attempts to achieve something was a persistent feeling. The fate of a potential invalid and his young wife, keeping vigil by his bedside, concerned almost no one around them. Alana was sure the film company representatives had gotten ahead of her, extending corrupt tentacles to envelop both the hospital and the police. But she had no proof. Mark remained in a coma. The doctors honestly bustled around him within the framework of their duties. Everything was sewn up, covered, quiet, and almost serene. After the darkest times, as the saying goes, a grey streak appears on the horizon, which then gradually lightens. Circumstances for Mark and Alana slowly began to change. He came out of the coma. He had gotten used to a lot. There wasn't a trace of surprise in Mark's eyes when he regained consciousness. As he explained, he had heard everything, or almost everything, that Alana had been quietly, patiently telling him while sitting by his bed. She deliberately hadn't told him the horror story about Julie's departure. She said she herself had missed him so much all this time that she had insisted on changing the guard by his bedside, chased away the mistress, asserting her rights as the legal wife. It was unclear from Mark's face whether he believed her or not. He had changed greatly, not just externally but internally. One man had climbed that sheer wall. After the coma, a different man awoke. This other man didn't ask the doctors anything, as if their daily rounds didn't concern him. He ate out of inertia, endured shots and fours, answered questions automatically. Like a soulless robot. A couple of weeks later, Alana needed to leave the hospital briefly one evening. She had long since brought her laptop to the room, working in her free time, but now she needed a face-to-face meeting with a client. Her idea for the interior design of a pavilion for a fashionable artist was too bold, so she decided to show her sketches to the client first. She hadn't left the hospital walls for so long that the fresh air made her almost giddy. The conversation with the client, who fully approved her work, dragged on. Strong coffee and pastries were followed by wine. Then the client dropped her off at the hospital by taxi. It was past midnight. Alana tiptoed into the room, thinking Mark had been asleep for a long time. They still gave him sedatives and painkillers at night. She was met by an odd, artificial silence in the room. Mark was sleeping, but somehow too unnaturally. Alana immediately raised the alarm. 3 hours later, there was a big investigation in the doctor's lounge. One question was on the table. Who gave a strong sleeping pill to a critically ill, immobile patient? If Alana hadn't returned in time, saving Mark would have been impossible. The on-duty doctor, nurses, aides, all denied everything. The head of the department, called in the middle of the night, promised to file a police report the next day for an investigation. Hearing that the police might get involved in the clinic's internal affairs, the culprit was found. It was that same nurse who had once blocked Alana's path to Mark's room. Tearfully, she confessed, he complained so much about insomnia. "I didn't think he'd do such a thing." He said he didn't want to bother his wife, that the sleeping pills the doctor prescribed weren't helping. "I shared my own medication with him. He just asked me not to tell anyone, and I kept quiet about our conversation. He's so kind-hearted, and look at the trouble he's in with his spine. How could anyone sleep well with that? Forgive me, foolish woman that I am." When Mark had fully come to, Alana initiated a difficult conversation. "Why did you do that? Is life unbearable? Or do you want me to leave? Do I irritate you?" "I want you to leave, to disappear," Mark answered. "You don't irritate me. But your pity doesn't sit right with me. Don't you understand? I'm not a man anymore. Not only a wheelchair-bound invalid, but also a log. I talked to the doctor. The chances of me becoming a full man again are extremely slim. That's it. You don't need such a life, Alana. I promise there won't be any more attempts, but you pack your things and leave, once and for all." She listened to him in silence, then calmly began preparing a tray of food. She answered only after a while. "Allow me to decide for myself whether to leave you or not. I'm not moving until you're back on your feet." Don't even hope for it. Then we'll see why fate sent us such a test. To test us both for loyalty or to build strong character. It all depends on us. Looks like it's time to pay some life debts. I'm ready. Are you with me? Or do you want to hide your head in the sand? Mark was silent. Alana didn't know what was going on in his head and didn't ask yet. Soon they would be discharged from the hospital. The doctors couldn't help them further. What was left? To accept that all of yesterday had become memories. Tomorrow was still plans and dreams. Would they come true? Who knows? So only today remained, and Alana wasn't going to ruin it for herself or her husband. Love takes many forms. Inside her now was a lot of warmth and pity for Mark. She was making a mistake, helping a ladies' man who had betrayed her more than once. Who had the right to judge her for that? A person is the architect of their own happiness. Steve had run away from the children's home again. His small stature and thinness helped. Not everyone could slip through the narrow gap in the fence that the caretaker, Uncle Ignat, hadn't discovered and patched yet. He went to the park, watching two people there. A man in a wheelchair and a woman intently pushing it along the path. What drew him there like a magnet? The answer was simple. He knew this woman. He had seen her designing a playroom and a playground with attractions at their orphanage. Then she had coffee with the director for a long time. Steve's curiosity knew no bounds. Naturally, he asked the other kids who she was, acting so familiar. Strangers didn't just walk around like that here. The boys laughed at him. That's Alana, a designer, one of our former kids. Like you, her parents died in an accident. She lived here too. Only she had no one left. Your dad became an invalid, started drinking. He hasn't shown up here in ages, not since they terminated his parental rights. Within the orphanage walls, there was always its own world, with no secrets from each other. So now Steve had gone on a mission, and the guys were covering for him. The price? 5 servings of ice cream. He checked the cash in his pocket. For good measure, he even took out a 500 ruble note, sniffed it, and held it up to the sun. These manipulations attracted the attention of a gang of teenagers. They surrounded him instantly, bristling. What's up, kid? Walking alone without mommy and daddy? Don't know what to spend your stash on? We'll help you spend it on a pack of cigarettes. This is enough even for a couple of the expensive ones. You don't mind, do you? Scrawny Steve, at 12, looked no older than 8 or 10. How could he handle this pack? He slowly backed toward a tree so the trunk would cover his back. At least they couldn't come from behind to knock him down quickly. A couple of years in the orphanage had taught him that trick and more. The only thing he regretted was losing the money they had all pooled. They exchanged it with one of the aides. He really wanted to bring ice cream for the guys. He promised. He had to deliver. Steve didn't realize he had caught Alana's attention. The habit of observing groups of teenagers and children had formed in her back at the orphanage. She knew from bitter experience that such groups weren't always friendly and often looked for trouble. And it was a good scenario if they were just bored, not already set on something criminal. The desperate little sparrow was putting up a bold defense. Alana immediately remembered how they used to stand back to back like that in the early days, not letting the bullies get behind them, not showing fear, just as he was doing now, leaning against the poplar trunk. Parking Mark's wheelchair in the shade, she approached the heated group without hesitation. She immediately saw the boy clutching the bill, trying to save it. Son, they'd send you for death itself. Your father and I won't get our bread and milk at this rate. And you know he needs food and medicine on schedule. Steve played along masterfully. Mom, why scold me right away? I met some friends, got to talking. You'll get your milk and bread right away. I'll run and get it. The teenagers backed away from the boy. One thing was to pressure a lone kid, another was to tangle with someone whose parents would step in and file police reports. Some mothers would hand out bruises themselves for their kids without blinking. This one looked a bit crazed. Better to steer clear of such types. Less trouble. Alana put a protective arm around Steve's shoulders and asked, So tell me, dear, what are you doing out alone at this hour? Where are your parents? Don't they care about you at all? Letting someone so young wander this park alone. Steve frowned, sniffled, and began his well-rehearsed monologue. Mom died, Dad's an invalid, drinks non-stop, doesn't even remember me. They already terminated his rights. So no one looks after me? Alana inquired with lively interest. No grandparents, other sensible relatives? I don't have anyone. I'm from the children's home. Alana started at the unexpectedness. How do you know my name? You're one of ours, Steve answered importantly. The kids at the home told me. And I'm not that little. I'm already 12. My mom used to say, it's the breed on the male side. We are all short, but good things come in small packages. He would have kept talking, but she interrupted him. Let's go. I left my husband over there. We'll all have dinner together, and then I'll walk you back to the home. I'll say I asked you to come help with paints and brushes. Do you know how to draw? Steve was taken aback. The urge to draw was his little secret, but he rarely drew pictures. He was embarrassed that he liked to draw bouquets of flowers and a girl named Annie from the 5th grade. He wasn't about to confess all that to this Alana. The rescuer's husband seemed quiet and uncommunicative to Steve. But the homemade dinner for 3 was fantastically delicious. The hostess kept putting pieces of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and salad on his plate. Steve hadn't eaten so well in a long time. Later, the two of them walked through the evening streets. He carried a bag of already rather melted ice cream with great ceremony, imagining how happy the boys would be with such rich spoils. There were 20 servings. Enough for everyone. The leftovers could even be hidden in the kitchen freezer. Steve inquired businesslike, Your husband, why is he so quiet? Where did he get his injury? Also in a car accident, like my dad? Alana didn't like discussing her troubles with strangers, but the boy was so sensible, so hers and understandable, that she suddenly felt like talking. He's having a hard time. He was a stuntman, strong and brave, and the immobility is driving him crazy. He can't find his place in this new life. Openness for openness. Steve looked carefully at his escort and shared trustingly, That kind of trouble left me without a father. He was a bricklayer, a real artist. Everyone admired his work. When his legs gave out after an injury, he couldn't accept it. And then Mom was gone. At first, I ran to get him vodka myself. Our neighbor lady works at the store. She'd quietly sell me bottles. I thought it would warm his soul and he'd stop, calm down. It didn't work out. He drowned completely in that vodka. Stopped noticing me. You can't live large on a disability pension. There was often no food at home. That same neighbor from the shop fed me on the sly. The world isn't without kind people, in quotes. One of the neighbors reported to the guardianship authorities. They took me to the orphanage, even though my father was alive. He visited me there only twice and then disappeared. Alana, listening attentively, thought for the 100th time, every house has its sorrow. She needed to ask the orphanage director about this boy in more detail. There was something very soulful, cozy about him. She and Mark could take Steve in for holidays and vacations. She knew such practices were encouraged at the institution. That evening gradually began to change the atmosphere in Mark and Alana's home. The big and the little man became friends. Steve poured all his unspent love for his father onto Mark. More than once, Alana caught them in deep conversation. She saw a smile on her husband's face after Steve's visits from the orphanage. Gritting his teeth, Mark agreed to work with dumbbells and other equipment to strengthen his arms. He told Alana, You win. I'll try to live on within the circumstances life offers. Show me where everything is in the kitchen. Just don't laugh. I found a cooking site online. The recipes are amazing. Simple ingredients, but so interesting. I'll start trying tomorrow. It's time for me to start asking for your forgiveness for everything I've done. I didn't scold you about the groceries and receipts out of malice. I blamed you, said you were a bad homemaker, to drown out my own conscience. I go to other women because things aren't right at home. I was stupid, prioritizing the wrong values. Alana hugged him around the shoulders, pressed close. With her vivid imagination, a scene from the film Love and Doves popped into her head, where the heroine says, So what if there was that other woman? She showed us how much you love me, how much I love you. Alana couldn't even remember the last time she and Mark had declared their love for each other. It wasn't really their thing. But this trouble had shown her precisely that the love in her heart for her husband hadn't gone anywhere. And she felt that what he felt for her wasn't just so-called deep gratitude. Here, without passion and physiology, everything was falling into place. What a person is capable of, what they are willing to sacrifice. A couple of days ago, Alana ran into Julie at the store. She wasn't alone. She was holding onto some man's arm. Seeing her former close friend, Julie began to display exaggerated attention to her companion. diligently trying to elicit a response. It seemed to Alana that Julie's beau was more interested in the beer aisle at that moment. Then he dragged his woman toward the snacks you could choose as beer snacks. Alana read no love for her orphanage sister in his eyes. She immediately understood. This was another fan of the 3-in-1 format. To each their own. They had made their choice. Steve was happy. He had found friends. Of course, he dreamed that Mark and Alana would become not just friends to hang out with, but real family. Everyone at the orphanage thought about that. He was no exception. But even the possibility of visiting his new acquaintances was such a delight, such a pleasure, that he didn't hope for more. Everything changed by chance. The children's home was diligently preparing for the new year. The beloved winter holiday promised a semblance of homeliness. On these days, as the clock chimed, the children always made the same wish. I want a family. I dream of being found. Steve didn't believe in all those tales about New Year's miracles from Santa and the Snow Maiden. He wasn't that little. He understood that all the gifts under the tree came from sponsors. But he would have a different surprise gift. Alana had promised him something extraordinary. Sharp-eyed, attentive Alana was indeed preparing a special gift for her young charge. The orphanage director had given her a hint, showing her a find by one of the aides. During a deep clean before the holidays, in Steve's absence, his secret stash had been found in the home. Drawings revealing his heartfelt attachment. A girl, Annie, with a dog in her arms. The same Annie on a sled, in a field of flowers, with ice cream, with a doll. Alana was amazed. Steve had obvious talent for drawing, and this little partisan had stoically kept silent about it at their house. Mark, who had thought a bit lately, was taking a very active part in the New Year's preparations. Would you believe it? He had already mastered pies and pastries. For the holiday table, he intended to bake a real cake. And so the long-awaited day of December 31st arrived. The surprise for Steve remained a secret for now. But the fluffy forest beauty sparkled with lights. The apartment smelled invitingly of fresh baking. Dressed up Steve's eyes even stung from all this homely atmosphere. Alana, who had brought him, quickly handed the guest over and announced she still had errands. The men went to the kitchen to busy themselves with Olivier salad and herring under a fur coat. This important activity was interrupted by a doorbell ring. This was strange. Random people hadn't dropped by Alana and Mark's place in a long time. An excited Steve hurried to find out who had been brought to their door on this pre-New Year's winter evening. On the threshold stood Santa Claus with a big curly beard and a tiny snow maiden in a gorgeous blue costume trimmed with white fur. Over Santa's shoulder peeked a sack of gifts. The snow maiden held an easel and a box of brushes and paints. Steve broke into a sweat from the tension. He recognized the snow maiden immediately. This was his dream. The girl Annie from the 5th grade was looking at him wide-eyed and smiling joyfully. It was the best new year in the lives of all 4 of them. A table of treats, TV with entertaining shows, little surprises for children and adults under the pine boughs, conversations, cake, champagne, and rivers of lemonade. When the young guests were finally settled to sleep, Alana showed Mark one more gift. An invitation to a clinic in Germany, she explained. My love, they're not promising a miracle. That won't happen. You'll need a series of very complex operations. With positive progress, you'll start walking, but not entirely on your own. Permanent crutches, a walker, the wheelchair again when you're tired. There's another piece of good news. The German specialists promised they can fully restore your male function. Mark didn't believe her, was even afraid to think it possible. He asked the main question. And where will we get the money for all this? Treatment abroad is very expensive. Alana, who had been hugging him, pulled back. That's already settled. There's a buyer for my parents' 3-room apartment in the city center. A realtor I know found us a 1-bedroom replacement. After we return from Germany, we'll move there. It's on the outskirts, but there's plenty of fresh air, a park nearby, a river not far off. Decent infrastructure in the area. Let's go to sleep, Mark. The morning is wiser than the evening. After the winter break, when the kids go back to the home, we'll discuss the details, start packing for the move so we can settle into the new place after your treatment. Alana, after checking that Steve and Annie were sleeping soundly, soon fell asleep herself. But Mark was thinking feverishly. Where had he missed the most important thing? He had gotten the best woman in the world, and he, the fool, hadn't been able to understand it. He hadn't valued her, fed his beloved with jibes and scrutiny of her spending, denigrated her abilities as a wife and homemaker, chased after phantom relationships with others, even planned a divorce, chose a ring for that airhead Marina to propose. How many mistakes had he made in his life? How could he make Alana stay with him always now? What was really in her soul and heart? Did she love him, or was she just endlessly pitying an invalid? The morning of January 1st started late. Alana woke up because someone was whispering, "Aunt Alana, I'm so grateful you invited me along with Steve for the holidays. I washed the dishes in the kitchen and put the kettle on. There's so much delicious food left." From the other side of the double bed, there was also sniffling. Alana smiled. That was Steve. "Alana, Mark is sleeping like a baby. It's time for everyone to have breakfast. But we'll wait for him, of course. Whatever we do it together. Otherwise, what kind of family is that?" The 10 days of holidays flew by in an instant. Steve, Annie, and their temporary older friends managed to do everything. They went sledding in the parks and built a snowman. At the cinema, they watched 3 heavily advertised fairy tales. At the water park, they dreamed of the beach and summer. Moreover, kitchen duties became a communal affair. It was fun to knead dumpling dough together and wrap the filling. And the shashlik they made right in the oven grill. For the road, they baked a mountain of pies for the kids who had spent the holidays at the orphanage. Alana remembered her own somewhat hungry youth again, how she and Julie used to wait for such lucky ones who were taken in by families for the holidays. Left alone, Mark and Alana felt a pang of sadness. Kids in the house were like a sweet, little natural disaster. All of Mark's tools were overturned. He and Steve had been looking for little nails to make a frame for the boys' drawing. The picture had everything in its place. The 4 of them in a field full of wildflowers. Alana, seeing this creation for the first time, again thought Steve had a direct path to art school. Such talent needed the right setting and training. And how Annie, unembarrassed, sang for the audience before a movie session. Santa at the cinema had called for the loudest voices, and she went up. Her voice was ringing, like a silver stream. She should discuss with the director whether the home knew about the kids' talents. They had a quiet dinner. Alana decided to return to the conversation about the trip to Germany. Like it or not, they had to vacate the apartment. The holidays were over, many cares and chores lay ahead. She'd need to talk to the locksmith again. They'd need movers. Mark couldn't help with that. They discussed everything quickly, somewhat curtly. They watched TV in silence, postponing packing for the next day. Each was lost in their own thoughts. Mark couldn't sleep again. He was making the most important, fundamental decision of his life. Having made up his mind, he calmed down a bit. It seemed to him he had finally set his priorities right. In the morning, Alana got up early, tried to wake him, but he kept putting her off. Then he suddenly opened his eyes, pulled her by the hand to sit beside him. "Alana, I'm not going to Germany. I won't have any operations. The price for them is too high on the bill. But it's about your future, your health." Alana tried to reason with him. "You don't understand, my love. Just be with me, and I'll start living from a clean slate. I'll look for sedentary work for people like me. And I really want us to adopt Steve and take in Annie as a foster daughter. That's why we need this big apartment. We'll raise them, become a real, full-fledged family. Will you walk this path with me, stay with an invalid like me?" "I'm with you, my love," Alana answered without hesitation. "I didn't dare suggest it myself, but I would be the happiest woman if we could make it happen. I'm here. We are together. At that moment, Julie was opening a message on her computer from a new potential candidate for the role of her other half. That hopeless Alana is still fussing over that half-man, blowing dust off him. Didn't abandon her husband in trouble. Some eternal Mother Teresa she is. Julie, am not planning to make such mistakes in life. Everyone in this world has their own values, and everyone will eventually settle all accounts with their own fate.